I think that when I had him, I was just like, well, I'm not going to be the parent, which means I'm not going to be mom. So I don't really have to think about like what it's going to mean. And that has turned out to be incorrect. Because of course I have to, I am a mom. I grew a human, I gave birth, and it took a, a few years probably before I was very much dealing with the emotions in real time. So like definitions and this and that weren't really top of the mind. And so when I had a little space from it and he was a little older and the relationship with his adoptive family was a little more established was when I was kind of like, okay, you know, do I feel like a mom?
Welcome to the How It Feels to Be a Mother podcast, where we dive into the emotional complexities and varied experiences of motherhood. I'm your host, Sarah Broberg. This judgment-free zone is a place where mothers can express their authentic feelings and experiences as whole human beings. In each episode, we'll explore the catalyst question at the heart of this movement. How does it feel to be a mother? Through engaging discussions with mothers from diverse backgrounds from around the world, we'll explore the complexity of emotions along the continuum of motherhood. Join us as we speak with mothers from all walks of life, from those with infants to those with adult children, uncovering the vast emotional continuum of motherhood. Whether you find motherhood to be a blessing or a challenge or somewhere in between, sometimes all at once, this podcast is here to validate your feelings and to break the stigma, shame, and guilt that can often accompany maternal experiences. Tune in and be a part of a movement that empowers mothers to embrace the emotional depths of what it really feels like to be a mother. Join the conversation.
In this episode of How It Feels to Be a Mother, we speak with Renee, a 33-year-old mother to a 14-year-old son. Today, Renee shares her unique journey of motherhood, which began unexpectedly at age 19. Placing her son in an open adoption, she navigates the evolving feelings of being a birth mother, from the challenges of early motherhood to the joys of watching her son grow into adolescence. Renee opens up about the ever-changing definition of how it feels to be a mother. Whether you're a mother yourself or just curious about the emotional facets of parenthood, this conversation is worth a listen. Thank you so much for joining me, Renee. I appreciate it.
Yes, of course. Happy to be here.
Okay, great. So before we start with our catalyst question, I'd love to give people just kind of a bit of context to your story. So if you wouldn't mind sharing your age, your preferred pronouns, your relationship status, and then the age of your children and their preferred pronouns as you know them.
Okay. Well, Renee, I am 33. I go by she, her. And I am married to a wonderful man. And my child is 14. He goes by he, him, and his name is Liam.
Okay, great. All right. So we're going to kick this off. This question's not going to be a surprise to you at all. But the question is, how does it feel to be a mother?
How does it feel to be a mother? It feels pretty unique to me, I feel like, in the sense of, well, it feels unique and it feels ever evolving. Because my son is 14. However, I had him when I was 19, which is crazy that he's almost to that age. I don't know how that's possible. I mean, he's still 5 years away, but my brain speeds it up. So I had him when I was 19, and since I was not expecting to be pregnant at 19, I ended up placing him in an open adoption, which has gone so well, like so beautifully. Great relationship with him, great relationship with his adoptive family. So I became a mom at 19, but I didn't do the raising. So the way I've always described being a birth mother is that I am a mom, but I don't necessarily feel like a parent. And so it's an interesting paradox to be in, I think. And so the definition of mother has evolved for me, and then how it feels, because I feel like how it feels is different from like a quote unquote definition.
Yeah.
And so how it feels is honestly sometimes confusing for me. Um, it, yeah, it can feel like I'm constantly trying to define and redefine what it means.
Mhm.
And and then some days I land on like, okay, today it feels really cool because we had this really great conversation. And then some days it feels like I'm not really a mom. Like I don't really feel momish. Like, does it really even count? And then there's all of the in-betweens as well.
Mhm.
So it feels very interesting, and it feels like it changes kind of day by day. But he's my only child that I did not have with my current husband, that I had with a high school sweetheart who I'm also on very good terms with. Um, so we don't have any. My husband and I don't have any kids yet. It's in the plans, as far as you can plan fertility. But so that'll be. You could ask me this question again in like 3 or 4 years, and it'll be completely different.
Yeah, I feel like for a lot of us, it's like maybe even 3 to 4 days or 3 to 4 weeks
That's
or months. It can feel very different. Three
oh
minutes.
yeah.
How about 3 minutes?
3 minutes. Yes. Yeah. Which is part of what I think has evolved the definition for me is, of course, when I was 19, my other friends were not having kids. And now, 14 years later, most of my friends do have kids. Most of my friends are mothers. And so watching them grow and evolve and seeing what motherhood is to them and how it feels like to them. And it is very much like, texting back and forth. And it's like, this morning has been a nightmare. And then by the evening, I'm getting these videos of like this cute little thing that their kid did in the evening. And just like, oh, did you see how she said this or what she did with the dog? And so it definitely seems like a spectrum. And it's not like you move smoothly from one into the other. It seems very like hopping around.
Hmm. Hmm. Does it feel like you thought it would?
That's a great question. I think it's interesting because I don't really think I thought about how it would feel. So like, does it feel how you thought it would? I think actually I'll probably go ahead and say no, because I think that when I had him, I was just like, well, I'm not going to be the parent, which means I'm not going to be mom. So I don't really have to think about like what it's going to mean. And that has turned out to be incorrect. Because of course I have to, I am a mom. I grew a human. I gave birth, and it took a, a few years probably before I was very much dealing with the emotions in real time. So like definitions and this and that weren't really top of the mind. And so when I had a little space from it and he was a little older and the relationship with his adoptive family was a little more established, was when I was kind of like, okay, you know, do I feel like a mom? And if I do, what does that feel like? And that's when I was like, yes, I feel like a mom. And it feels good and weird and confusing and lovely. And um, so, yeah, I don't think it was not how I expected it to be, mostly because I didn't really have any expectations. And I think the ones I did have were that the title of mom would not apply to me.
Hmm. Hmm. How has the feeling of being a mom evolved for you over time?
Ooh, I think so. Kind of going from that, where I didn't really expect to feel like a mom, to eventually deciding, like, no, I do consider myself a mother. So that was kind of the first evolution, or the first kind of like how it had changed over time. And then I feel like there was a real shift again when he got into the like 11, 12, 13 land that he's in now, like entering this kind of pre actual adolescence, zone where he's very much, he's much more his own person, where he's formed some of his own beliefs, and he's formed a lot of opinions and these interests that he can just talk about. And he's interested in like bigger topic types of things and deeper topic types of things, and so it's felt like moving into that realm was, I think, a little jarring for me at first, because I'm used to this like kid who's like really into this. And so he just wants to talk my ear off about this thing that he's into and show me the video games and do all this stuff, to someone who is still, retaining those personality characteristics. But now, we're also talking about, deeper level things. Like he came and stayed with us, and, and we were driving somewhere, and there was, a person on the street corner with a sign asking for money. And he was like, I wonder like how that happens and things like that. And, and then starting to have that conversation, and those just aren't things you really talk about with like a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old, they're playing with their stuff. And so it's just, so then it's felt, I don't know, it's almost felt more collaborative, I think is probably the word I'm going to go with, as he's gotten older, because it feels much more give and take. Whereas beforehand, it was just, I'm following him around. I'll do, I'm at the whim of whatever he wants to show me or what he wants to play with, or, especially in like toddler land where I'm running around making sure he doesn't like stick his fingers in light sockets. But then, through like kid land. So it just kind of felt like I'm just sort of at his whim, or I'm doing things for him or with him. And this felt more like give and take, like, let's have a conversation about this. And, he's asking me more questions. And so it's felt a lot more, I guess, collaborative or involved, I guess, as time has gone on.
Mm-hmm. What is your favorite thing about how it feels to be a mom?
Ooh. I think, I'm just going to go with like what I feel like sounds like the selfish answer, which is just like, it's so cool seeing pieces of me in him. I just feel like it's been
relate to that. I can relate to that.
Sometimes it's like, oh no, that's me. That's my attitude right there. But sometimes it's like, oh, the way he did that, or he looks like this, or he just made that face, and that's a face that I've seen myself make, or so honestly, like that's one of the best parts. And I think that probably feels, as I'm saying it, important to me, because since I didn't raise him and things like that, like it means a lot to me to see myself, reflected in either his looks or his personality traits or things like that. And I think I look for it probably, I mean, I can't say definitively, but I feel like I probably look for it a little more than if I, was raising a kid of my own. It's kind of like, okay, I know this is who you are and what your personality's like and things like that. Whereas kind of when I get together with him, I'm like, am I in there? Like, I did do this, right? I didn't imagine that, So that, and again, like this kind of cool collaborative time we're coming up on, where we're having more discussions and talking more about, I don't know, like we do still talk about, right now he's very into manga, like Japanese comic books.
Oh yeah.
And so we talk a lot about that, and I understand what I can. And I've like gotten a couple for myself to read through them and see what the fuss is about and all of that stuff. And so I've always really liked knowing what he's interested in and then kind of checking it out for myself. So of course we still do that, but it's cool to also have other conversations. I saw him last month, and and we had this like big in-depth talk about like, because, we don't live forever. And this is what he said to me. He's like, yeah, so we don't live forever. So we've really got to like take notice of, what's around us and stuff. And I'm like, I didn't figure that out until like my mid to late 20s. What? Like, so it's just cool to have those conversations. So I think the best part has been, kind of getting to that age where we can really converse, and when I can be like, those are my eyes. I did that, Yeah.
Yeah, I have like a little mini me running around. Like we each got one. So
Oh,
yeah, it's kind of
nice.
funny. Our friends are like, how did you do that? Like exactly.
How
Well,
did
not
you
exactly
special
because he's a
order?
boy, but still. Yeah.
Yes. I love it. It's nice. It's a
So
good
what
balance. It's a good balance.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. It seems to be working, and then it doesn't, and then,
Oh, yeah.
that's okay too.
Sure. Sure.
hmm What surprises you about how it feels to be a mother?
Surprises me. I think I've been surprised. Um, hmm, that's a good one. What surprises me about being a mother? I think I think the identity shift for sure. Um, I don't feel like that's so much of a surprise anymore. I feel like nowadays, like my friends, especially who have become moms or things like that, I feel like we talk about it a little bit more nowadays. Or maybe that's just the circles that I'm running in because I am a mom and have so many mom friends. So, like, I care a lot about moms having a voice
Mm.
and being very transparent about the mothering process. And, and I feel like I think you have teenagers too. So I feel
I
like
do.
maybe you can relate to back in the like mid early 2000s, there was still kind of this like rosy glow painting of motherhood, and it's this beautiful thing, and it's, you know, there was just a really rosy element to it. And of course, again, my situation being different, there was definitely not a lot of that rosy glow built in because I had
Mm.
to, I had him and then placed him with the adoptive family, so I went home without him. And so that right there will like wipe away any rosy glow. But then there was um, the second degree tear that needed stitches, and the peri bottle and the tux pads, and for me, not breastfeeding. And so then it was like the super tight sports bras and don't let the shower water touch it, touch them or they'll just go bananas. And um and the you still look pregnant after you give birth, and just a lot of this stuff that was never talked about, or if it was, it just like, I was also quite young, so maybe I just wasn't at the age where people were talking about that. But I never saw it in popular media. I never read about it in articles. And, of course, having a child shifted how I viewed myself and how I kind of viewed where I was in life. And then having that shift, but then not really having the baby to quote unquote prove it,
Mm.
was was just very surprising. It was very surprising to me, where I was like, wait, women go through all of this? Like, I remember asking my mom, I was like, did you need a peri bottle? And what did you use? Like, she's the one who went out and got, the tux pads. And I just took the peri bottle home with me from the hospital. And now they have the super cool ones you can hold, and they have like the down spout that comes up. So you don't have to like hold it down there and squeeze it up. Like,
Some type of science experiment. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I feel like that's even come a long way. Like the things that are readily available for like the postpartum experience. Like,
Mhm.
and that's what I do for all of my friends who become moms. Like, sure, I'll grab you like a onesie and a pack of diapers, but like I'm buying postpartum gifts for all of my friends. They all get postpartum underwear and padsicles. And, there's a brand that I love of postpartum underwear that has like an ice pack that goes with it. And you can
Oh.
either like put it on your stomach if you have a C-section, or it can go like in the actual crotch. And you can
Mm.
heat this pad or you can freeze it. So I get those. Again, the peri bottle, the if they're breastfeeding, the nipple pads and nipple cream and, the Dermoplast pain relieving spray meant for your undercarriage. And so that's what I've always gotten for all of my friends when they have babies, because that part of it was like, wait, what? Because you're just like, you're going to have this baby and about labor and birth. But then like the whole afterbirth for mom was like, wait, what? I didn't know that all of this went on with my body down here.
Yeah, and by the way, here's a newborn.
Surprise!
Take care of this while you're at
it. Yeah. And then especially in the hospital, because being in the hospital for a few days, it was a pretty smooth birth. But still in the hospital for a few days with him. And so I'm really cherishing that time, because then from the hospital, he goes to the family. And so I didn't really want to leave him for any longer than I had to. And so then it was like, oh, we're going to take him down the hall for these tests. And I'm like, okay, I'll come with. And then like getting off the bed is a whole process. And like walking a few steps is a whole process. So, and then you want to hold him and move him. And you're just like, wait, I can't do both at the same time. Like I need both of my arms to push me off of this chair right now. I can't hold him and do that. So especially like taking I feel like if they had been like, all right, bye, take the baby home now, I would have been like, you didn't qualify me for this. Did you want to ask me some questions before you send me home with this? So yeah, lots of surprising, like immediate after birth. That was very eye-opening for me, for sure.
Like what you're hearing? We'd love your feedback. Please leave a review.
Talk to me a little bit about some of the things that might concern you about how it feels to be a mother.
Oh, man. I wish my therapist were here for this.
Well, guess what? You can share the podcast with her.
I can. I'll be like, hey, everything we've been talking about for the last 3 years, I just gave a running list of it on a podcast. Because this has, as my husband and I have talked about having kids, and we've sort of moved into that space just this year. Just very recently went off birth control to start that process. But it took me a very long time to get there. In part, of course, because of my experience as a mother so far, having had my son and kind of becoming tuned in to how tough it can be to be a mother. That is part of why it's mostly why I made the decision I made to place him in an open adoption, is because I knew I wasn't ready. I knew I didn't have the resources. I think I had made a joke to my mother, in the few days after I birthed him, she was like, well, what do you feel like you would need to be able to keep him? And I joked oh, I don't know, my own house and a loving partner and a stable job, ha ha ha. And, down the line, my mom was like, that might not actually be a joke. It might be what you need for this. And I was like, oh yeah, that's not a joke. Actually, that is what I would want. And so having tuned into that pretty early, it's always been a concern of mine. I haven't had the rosy glow view since then. I'm being a mom is hard. It takes a lot. And so my concerns were always am I ready for that? And for a while I turned the corner the other way, where I was no, when you become a mom, you lose your identity and you don't do anything for you anymore. And your life becomes about your kid and you can't go on trips. And so, talking to my husband, back in the early days when we were together, I'm he was oh yeah, well, when we have kids someday. And I'm hold up, maybe we don't want kids. And if we do, we have to go have adventures and we have to do this, because once we have a kid, that's it. That's the end of all of that stuff. And which I have worked through. Or talked through at least. And because those were concerns of mine, where it's okay, where do I go once I have a kid, because I have been through an identity shift on a both bigger and smaller scale, because I didn't, have my son at home. So like my lifestyle didn't change much. I still, I had him in the summer, and then a month later I went back to my college classes.
Mm.
And, whereas actually like, oh, I have to bring this baby home now and we have to have stuff for it. And, and then from there, watching my friends go through the process of having children and watching it change their lives and what it meant to them. And some of them talked about it very openly, some of them didn't. And, and some of them became real homebodies. And some of them were like, no, we're going to, take this kid wherever. And some of them were like, we're going to do this, but it's much more scheduled now. Like, we can't do this until after 7, until after the baby goes to bed, or, we got to cancel because we've gotten collectively 4 hours of sleep in the last 2 days, and we just can't make it tonight because we're dying. And so in that realm, roundabout way of getting there, what concerns me as a mother or about being a mother, is access to resources that moms need, in the sense of paid parental leave, or, community, access to community resources, like affordable, like mommy and me groups, or, or affordable, mommy and me yoga, or, just community. And because like moms need moms, and moms need support. And I feel that I'm very lucky in the sense that like my husband's mother lives in town, and so does his brother, and so do my parents, and so do most of our, our friends here. And so if we have a child, we'll definitely have a community that swoops in, to help us buy what we need to buy, or, babysit when we want to go on a date night, or, these things that I feel like can really help ground you and really help you feel like yourself, or not yourself, but at least just give you some space to just be you.
Yeah.
And not everyone has that. And so I think just which has become a huge piece of advocacy for me, is just wanting those things to very much be in place, and wanting to support policies or things like that, champion affordable childcare, or, just all of those things. So I think what had concerned me as a mother is that I think I wanted to be one with my husband sooner than we're giving it a go now. But I just didn't feel like the infrastructure was there for me. And having watched so many of my friends struggle to afford daycare, or, only really be able to do what they do because they drop their kid off at their mom's at 1 p.m. when the only daycare they could afford stops at 1 p.m., but they work till 5. So they have to go pick it up and, drop her off at her grandmother's house, and then work from her parents' house until 5 p.m. and then she can go home. And that's, I think, what concerns me about that, is that if I don't have access to that, then it'll be even harder for me to come home to myself. And being able to like come home to myself feels like it is very, very important.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned a few times now sort of your community, whether it's your family or your mom, your friends who are now mothers. And so, but I'm wondering if there are people in your life with whom you talk to about how it feels to be a mother.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That is honestly just like a handful of friends, like a few friends I can count on one hand. Primarily, I've started to actually try to talk to my own mother about it more, which is kind of wild to me that had never occurred to me. I'm like, oh, maybe I should talk to my mother about what it means to be a mother. or how it feels to be a mother. And even in those couple of questions, I've learned things I never knew. And part of it was that she moved here to Asheville when I was about 4 or 6 months old, from their community where they used to live in Maryland. And she was like, yeah, it was really hard and really lonely. I didn't have anybody, which kind of reaffirmed my need for community. But I feel like the people I talk about it the most with are friends who are moms. Like I have a friend who has a 2.5-year-old and she's pregnant with her second. And we talk about it all the time. And she'll tell me when she's having a crazy rough day, or she'll send me super cute videos, or we'll go over and go for like a neighborhood walk, you know, through their neighborhood. And so we talk about it a lot. And then honestly, it's pretty much it. Of course, I talk to my husband a lot about like everything that passes through my brain. I'm one of those people who thinks through talking, which he loves. External processor. Yes. But aside from that, it's really like social media. I talk about it a lot on social media, but it's not really a conversation. That tends to be sort of a one-way sort of thing. Like I see the experiences of like my friends, like college friends or things like that are on there. And then I'll respond to that sometimes. Like they might post, you know, like, oh my God, like, you know, I had my second kid and now we're just like cluster feeding 24/7. And, you know, and so then I, you know, can write in, I'm like, hey, I had a friend who went through that and it can, you know, be rough, you know, and send like a $20 DoorDash gift card or something like that. And so in those ways, it's kind of a conversation, but really it's just like one or two mom friends where they kind of talk to me through their experience. And that's, I think it's also part of, again, my unique situation is that, you know, I can't really relate with the parenting things. I can definitely like sympathize, put myself in their shoes, you know, give them space to vent, things like that. But, you know, no one's coming to me and being like, oh my gosh, like, did Liam go through this when he was 4? Because my 4-year-old is doing XYZ. Like, no one really comes to me and says things like that. So it's tougher, not tougher. I guess it's just those conversations aren't as frequent. Not very many people actually ask me how it feels to be a mother. You know, primarily because I don't do the parenting piece of it.
I think that, I mean, one of the reasons that I was so fascinated by the question is because I had never heard it asked. And, you know, I mean, how does it feel to be a mother? No, most of the time we're talking about like, what's it like, right? Like, oh, what's it like to be a mom who, you know, put your child up in an open adoption or whatever, you know, like it's more about like the day to day, I feel like, rather than like, or the logistics of it, rather than the emotions behind being a mother.
Right.
And so, so I don't know that it's, just you. I think we're not asking the question generally. So that's why I'm hoping to change that.
Which I think is such a good mission, is to be asking those questions that really dig under the surface. Not like, tell me what your schedule looks like as a mom, you know, what's it like? But like, how does that schedule feel? How does it feel to have to put that schedule in place? How does it feel when that schedule doesn't work out? How does it feel when like, and it's like, oh, that's right. Like this feels chaotic, but this piece of it is really sweet. And like getting, you know, accessing those things that we just so easily blow by. So that's why I love what you're doing.
Oh, thanks. So the last question, is there anything about how it feels to be a mother that you haven't talked about or we haven't talked about that you'd like to?
I guess perhaps maybe like an awareness piece, or kind of a gentle like reminder piece of all the different kinds of moms there are out there. Because that's a lot of what I've been unpacking in the last year or two as my husband and I have talked about having a kid. There's been a lot more for me to unpack with my experience as a mom so far, like how it has felt to be a mom so far. Simply because since I am not really recognized by society as a mother, I sort of blew past that question. How does it feel to be a mom? Like I have blown past that in my own life for 12 years. And it really only came up because my husband and I were talking about it, and I was having like some real issues visualizing it, or, I was having some real issues getting in touch with that, where it was like, how is this going to feel if we are parents together? How is it going to feel to be a mother a second time around? And it was accessing that was way harder than I thought it would be. And as it's the third time I've said this, unpack that, it's, sort of brought to the forefront, like those confused elements of being a mom, like how confusing it felt for a while. And honestly, like how sad it felt for a long time, and how sad, despite how wonderfully it's turned out, how sad it is on some level. My mothering experience has turned out really well, and it still makes me sad. And not having a recognized space, and not just for birth mothers, but for, grandparents who end up having to come in and be mom for whatever reason, or, aunts who show up and really, help out a single mother, or, like single mothers and their experiences, or just, same-sex couples who both identify as mom, but what does that mean? And so just kind of these mothers who tend to be seen as a little bit more on the fringes, or not seen because they're not like the typical like definition again. But so yeah, just talking about that piece of it, that these different mothering experiences, like no one's doing it wrong, and I think if someone, considers themselves to be a mother, for that to, of course, be respected. And no one has ever disrespected that for me. No one has ever been like, no, you're not a mom. What are you talking about? No one. But I think just like having a space like this, which thank you again very much for having me, to talk about that. Like it was both an honor and still like a little bit of a surprise that you wanted to chat, because I'm like, do I, like imposter syndrome? I'm like, should I be here? Like, am I a mom enough to be on this podcast? So having these platforms and, being able to put this awareness kind of out into the world, I think is also really important. So I appreciate you for that. And I appreciate this question for being able to talk about that a little more.
Thank you so much. I mean, you just hit the nail on the head so definitively about one of the reasons that I really wanted to do this work, which is to provide a safe space for mothers who feel left out of the standard narrative, right? About like, and so, you were just mentioning, aunts who come in, and the episode that's going to run, the next episode actually is an aunt who she had a kid of her own, and her nephews ended up adopting her nephews. Wow. 15 years later. So they were, so it's just, I'm just looking to highlight and to give a space and a voice for every mother, whatever stage, whatever age of their parenting journey. And I'm so grateful to you for sharing your unique story, and being able to do it so thoughtfully and effectively. So I know that this is going to resonate with a lot of listeners.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Well, thank you very much for, again, for having this space for all kinds of moms to be able to talk about these things that we are bringing out of the shadows and hopefully ushering in this kind of new era of transparency and support and connectedness.
Thank you.
Learn more about how it feels to be a mother by visiting howitfeelstobeamother.com and following us on our socials. Please join the conversation.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on this podcast, including those of the host and guests, are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of any entity they represent. Appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The content presented is solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information provided on this podcast or materials linked from the podcast or website is at the user's own risk. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical or mental health condition they may have, and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.